So, what's coming next for America based on the solar and lunar eclipse of August 2026? There are going to be some major shakeups. This eclipse, specifically the solar eclipse, is happening in Leo, which was the sign of the king. So, it is going to have a lot of effects on the president, the modern day king. The eclipse begins August 12th and it perfects at 1:36:42. That is when the eclipse is at its most intense. And that is when I cast the chart for Washington, D.C. Now, this eclipse itself is visible for 1 hour and 9 minutes. In the tradition, we equate each hour of time of the eclipse to having 1 year's worth of effects. And this eclipse will be visible for 1 hour and 9 minutes, which will equate to 1.15 years or around 14 months. The intensification of the eclipse effects is not immediate. Now, in the tradition, I will show you here on my chart. If an eclipse falls over here in around the first house quadrant area, it occurs quickly. It occurs in the first 1/3 of time because what we're doing is we're dividing the visible sky into three, right? So the first house here is when the sun rises, the 10th house here is when the sun culminates above our head, and the seventh house here is when it begins to set. So if it occurs in this first house area, essentially the main effects of the eclipse, the intensification period is called, occurs in the first 1/3 of time of effect time. If it's up in the 10th house, it occurs in the second third, right in the middle of the effect time. So again, it's 14 months of effect time. And I believe the intensification therefore, yes, it's around December 31st to May 2027, May 21st exactly. And what do we have going on in America at this time? We have the midterms coming up. So I believe the midterms are going to play a major role in bringing out the effects of this eclipse as we start having new representatives sworn in. The eclipse itself is approximately 6 degrees away from the midheaven. The midheaven's right on top of the sky. It's at 25 degrees Leo. The eclipse will be at 20 degrees Leo. So it's very close, and the midheaven is going to be the most public part of the chart. In our personal lives, this represents our career, our public standing. In a governmental chart, this points to visibility. This points to the one who puts themselves out there and they're always seen. So in our case, I believe this is our president. Also, Leo is the sign of the sun, right? In the tradition, Leos and Aries, but Leos especially, as it's the home sun, is the sign of the king. So the sun is in the highest position of this chart. Jupiter is co-present, Mercury is co-present. Saturn actually trines it from Aries, and the eclipse is only 1 degree from the fixed star Aljabuni. So I'm going to go to I'll show you a little about that later on as well. It's called the Lion's Head star. Being a Leo eclipse, and since Leo is already the sign of the ruler, there is very likely to be questions around leadership, legitimacy of leadership, the executive control. Normally, the sun is in domicile here. It's very powerful. But remember, an eclipse is an occultation of the sun. It's hiding it. Now, this eclipse is only, I believe, according to NASA, it's only about 5 degrees of visibility in North America. So its effects aren't extremely intense. In the tradition, the eclipse actually had to be very visible to have the most drastic effects. However, just because this eclipse is so close to the midheaven of Washington, D.C., I do believe the effects are going to be felt in a rather prominent way. Now, Saul, he even assigned the eclipses in Leos to king. Saul was a very famous medieval astrologer, Ibn Ezra as well. If the relevant eclipse configuration occurs in the 10th place, the government of the city will be affected. And this is the city that represents the national government. And the sun itself appears to be the chart victor. It's the signification of the king. And again, it is being occulted. This eclipse also has a very heavy fire sign connotation because it isn't a fixed sign as well. And fixed signs indicate things that create permanent, long-lasting change. So this will not be temporary. This will be an extremely long-lasting eclipse in terms of the effects that we feel. And we have Jupiter co-present. So that will calm things down. I believe it will settle things in the end. Mercury also is here. It will help settle things down in the end, but the effects of it are going to be long lasting. Now, an eclipse in a fire sign, with so much going on in the fire sign, also would have to do with weather, right? So we might see things like droughts, we might see things like fires, but also We have here Masha Allah. He also has it in fire signs: death of kings, divisions of kings, drought, bareness of the earth, famines, and then interpretively, political fire, just divisions within the ruling authorities, rivalries, struggles over succession. So we might start seeing issues between the president and the vice president, but also the ruler can lose office, power, health, or just standing, which is more likely, in my opinion. What I'll give you kind of a general preview of what I see coming just early in this little talk. The Democrats are going to take the midterms in a sweeping fashion. I believe that Republicans are going to lose all their power as far as the Congress and the Senate goes, and the executive branch is going to lash out. And they are going to lash out in a big way, and it's going to be undeniable because there will be a lot of legal challenges to him. So let's see, literal fire. We talked a little bit about that. The South Node, this is an interesting one too, because the South Node just moves into Leo. It's still at 29 degrees, 47 minutes. It's about 4 degrees from the midheaven. And in the tradition, the South Node signifies things that diminish. So in an eclipse, we could see something like removal from authority or just reduction of executive powers. He's going to be facing more challenges now. There has been resignations regarding these kind of things: declining public approval, loss of honors or prestige, the purge of senior officials. We might see something like that as well, where he just purges the whole cabinet and starts over, and the leader becomes very isolated. In my opinion, this is going to be a fight within the Republican Party. So I believe that the president, Donald Trump, will lose a lot of support where he used to have it, because they know that they can't win another election based on him anymore. So he's going to lose support from his people that he had been relying on. Now, the benefics are there too, though, right? We have Jupiter over here at 9 degrees. However, the sun and moon are both moving away from, they're separating from Jupiter. Masha Allah even said that a benefic aspect in the eclipse will help diminish it. However, again, it's not a very tight aspect, it's a co-present aspect. So I feel that this would be something like intervention by the judges or courts, or some kind of constitutional procedure, legislative actions. Jupiter signified the clergy, it signified law, moral authorities, people that were honest, and they had a lot of respect of the public in general. It can also be financial support or just preservation of the government at large. So it's some kind of crisis that occurs that ultimately is a signification of reform that comes in the long term. However, that support is mitigated. So I'm not saying it's going to be a smooth process at all. We still have Jupiter under the beams of the sun, right? It's only 11 degrees away. Technically, you have to be 15 degrees or more away to be outside of that. So when a planet exits from under the beams, that's when its biggest strength starts to show up. And that hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened yet. So Jupiter's powers are diminished, or they're more behind the scenes. They're more hidden. There will be things going on in the background that attempt to mitigate some of the disasters that come. Now, another interesting factor in this eclipse is Saturn, right? Saturn is actually in trine to this eclipse. It's still within orb. Saturn has a 9-degree orb in the tradition, and it is still there. And Jupiter is actually applying to Saturn as well. It's moving towards it, which will help stabilize in the long run. However, in mundane astrology, in the medieval tradition, any aspect to a malefic still causes overall harm. Now, the trine, I believe, will help to calm it down. It will settle it, but it will not be an easy process. So Saturn is the malefic of the sect in this chart. So he's not terrible, but he's in his fall. He's in Aries. He is a little bit weak. The sun in Leo does have some dignity. It's a fellow fire sign, so there's a triplicity dignity there. So there is a reception to a degree. Saturn's in Aries, it's the exaltation of the sun, therefore the sun is receiving it. So we do have some reception. So I believe that it calms things down just a bit. It helps preserve law and order in the long run. It will help preserve the bureaucracy and the government at large. However, again, Saturn's retrograde. It's in its fall. It's very weak. Ptolemy gave Saturn manifestations as restrictions, poverty, imprisonment, exile, destruction through cold, decay. So Saturn's more likely to stabilize, but it will only come after some kind of decay in the institution itself, likely through court orders, maybe some kind of constitutional restriction, austerity measures and things like that. But again, I do feel that the executive branch itself is going to lash out. It's going to be very upset. And I'm going to show you the mundane chart for Aries when the sun ingresses into Aries in 2026. Because in my opinion, that's showing outright war intensification. We have a major intensification of war. We have fighting between the political parties. In my opinion, it looks like there could be a domestic attack of some kind, maybe from some kind of extremist group, but I'll get into that a little bit later as well. Mercury is also in Leo, and Mercury in the tradition represents messages, it represents advisors, it represents the laws themselves, the way that they're written. It's any kind of communication, message. So it is co-present up here. It's just leaving the sun's the beams, so it's still barely hidden, so the effects could be diminished a little bit. But Mercury, you know, just being in this position, it can be some kind of controlled public messaging. Maybe the advisors, they take more control over the executive itself, or there's some kind of negotiation or legal settlement that ultimately occurs, because Mercury is going to conjunct Jupiter. So I feel like ultimately the courts step in. Jupiter is a major planetary significator of the courts and the court system itself. The fixed star Aljabuni itself actually falls in the head of the lion. It was also known as Al-Ris, Al-Assad, Al-Junabiyah. So this was a constellation in Leo. It took the ninth lunar mansion according to the Persian and Arabic astrologers. And it was known for travel, but also a time of enmity. It sharpens the sight of mind, but brings the threat of conflict, just as the lion sets upon its prey. So I might expect that as pride, that provokes opposition, which is not going to be anything new to those of you that follow American politics, but also aggressive public messaging, wounded dignity, and maybe intimidation overall. So let's compare the eclipse to the Aries ingress chart. The Aries ingress traditionally signifies the coming year ahead. If it's a fixed sign, you can use that chart for the entire year. If it's a mutable sign like this one is at 13 Gemini, you use it for the first 6 months of the years. If it's a tropical sign, you only use it for the quarters. So this one's 6 months, so it's still in play according to the medieval tradition. Now, the IC is at 20 degrees Leo. So the eclipse is occurring right on the IC of this chart, which tells me that people's homes will be affected. It also signifies opposition in general from the midheaven, from the executive, possibly to political enemies or political opposition. But I also feel like the will of the people highly changes, even by his own supporters' standards. He's losing support at a very rapid rate. And that's shown here by the eclipse hitting this IC, the bottom of the chart, right? So that represents the homes of the people, the roots of the country in general. So MAGA is known for their patriotic roots, or at least in their minds, that's what they're going for. But there is a dimming of that light as the eclipse is piling right on top of it. And interestingly, we have the moon and we have Venus up here in Aries exactly trine this as well. So I feel like this being in the 11th house points more to coalitions, political coalitions of Congress, of the opposing party, and it's going to affect them. And they're going to be the ones that like soak up the goodwill of the people down here. And then looking at Donald Trump's own chart as well, he's a 29.5 degree Leo ascendant. So all I did was I just moved the chart back a few seconds here to make his Leo move into the 12th house, because in quadrants, this is the first house, right? This whole Leo. And really, when I see something like that, like a half minute, I change it to quadrants. I know I use mostly whole signs, but for something like that, when it's very obvious, I generally switch to quadrants. So the midheaven of the eclipse is right on top of his Mars. The eclipse away is only 5 degrees. So this is someone that's lashing out. This is someone that's facing a lot of anger issues. They are mad because their political opposition is gaining power. There's also health problems indicated here. So I feel like a leader that has health problems and it's getting to be a lot, right? Can't handle it anymore. Their health, they're losing support. All these kinds of things are indicated by this in the 12th house. This is with the secret enemy's house. It's the house of poor health, confinement, right? And the eclipse degree is right on top of this. So, at its worst, am I saying confinement is going to happen? Like he's going to go to jail? No, I highly doubt that. It won't happen in our system. And since the eclipse is, again, it's only 5% visible, it's not quite that as intense, but you are going to get the effects of it where he lashes out, he faces political opposition, his health gets poor, those kinds of things. So this is like the end of the era as far as this presidency goes. It's just all showing that it's going to be lame duck from here on out. But he will lash out and he's going to start a lot of problems as we go into next year. And I'll give you a preview of that, of the 2027 Aries ingress, because that is crazy. So to summarize, we're looking at probably some kind of reorganization of the executive cabinet, the people closest to him. Definitely public humiliation or reputational decline, even more. Succession questions, very likely that there's going to be fractures within the Republican Party. Do they want to even touch anything that Trump has touched? Because I believe the whomping is going to be very bad in the midterms. Everything's pointing to that. Governmental reorganizations, definitely changes to public legitimacy, maybe court orders that slow down the executive branch and what they're allowed to do, because Jupiter is there, so it aids the overall government. So, courts, constitutional procedures, law, some kind of coalition will be built. And that'll help stabilize it, right? So it might involve, though, in the stabilization process, some kind of austerity measures, some kind of delays or public criticism. Definitely factions. So again, I feel like there's factions, and I already went through some of this with you on Trump's midheaven. So again, that being right on top, the Mars degree of his natal chart being right on the MC of the eclipse is interesting because, yeah, it's conflict. It can be military action too. Mars represents the military, and it being so much more in his 12th house, you can interpret it whole signs in the first, which is him taking action. But I feel like for him, it's more 12th house, so behind the scenes, anger and wrath, and maybe like getting covertly kicking up covert missions and things like that. But ultimately, they won't be covert. Like people will leak it, and it's probably going to really upset him because it's such a high up eclipse. Like nothing can be hidden anymore. Mercury's right there with it too. So even though they will try to hide things, it will get leaked into the public. So it's very aggressive action, and very likely military conflict is involved too, which I believe he's going to try to pick up as we move into 2027. There will be some kind of, he's going to attempt to rule through executive authority and emergency authority. So war will have to get kicked up. And you know what? Let me just give you the preview of the 2027 ingress chart while we're talking about it, because this is very chaotic, right? Here we actually have Leo rising as well. We have the ingress chart with 25 degrees Leo ascendant. So right, the degree of this eclipse is also the ascendant degree of the Aries ingress. The very second the sun moves into Aries, we have this happening. Like this is rare. You don't see this. So the eclipse is right on the first house, which represents the people, the public at large. Mars is again conjuncted and it's retrograde. This is a very angry populace. These are people that are ready to fight. Mars also rules the fourth house, so the domestic population. Where else does Mars rule though? The ninth house of the foreigner, right? This represents foreigners, but it also represents legal matters. So I feel that there will be rulings made that upset the homeland, right? This is the fourth house. It represents the homeland. It represents the people um, with roots here. So I feel like this is very likely some kind of a domestic attack of from maybe possibly from some kind of an extremist group. It's in Leo. The ninth house here rules is Aries. Fire signs are always going to be to the east. They're considered Eastern signs. So I believe like attacks on the eastern areas are more likely. And then what else is happening? We have Venus here exactly opposed Mars. So there's an opposition as well. The seventh house represents the other, it represents enemies, and that is opposed Mars. Now, where does Venus rule? That's an interesting one, right? Because Venus is up here in the 10th house. So Venus is the ruler of the 10th in this chart. So it's the ruler of the executive, and it's also the ruler of the third, of brothers and sisters. So we have one group and faction, probably belonging to the president, maybe going off to fight foreign wars again. And then the people are sick of it. They are going to fight against it. They try using lawfare. The ninth house also represents law. And, maybe something, some kind of action will be taken around foreigners. And there will be fighting around that. So this could be something where the ICE situation kicks up. ICE is going around, obviously upsetting a lot of people. This situation kicks up, and there is a real fight that breaks out over it. That's kind of my most likely interpretation. And obviously, the foreign wars, I feel like he's just going to keep going with that, but he's also going to kick up this whole ICE thing just to really piss off his political opponents. So that's kind of what I see, and I do feel like there's going very likely to be like an actual fighting this time. Like it won't just be protesting. There will be fighting, and this is very likely to have already been started right around the time of this ingress, possibly even right before it, right? Because Venus opposes Mars, but Venus is already passing Mars by 2 degrees. So if we take a fixed sign, I would say about a month each. This would probably even be by January. This is March 20th, so let's say January 20th. I would expect that to culminate fighting between these two political parties, but also over foreigners, because this rules this ninth house here, and it rules this domestic house. We've already seen like little bits of that, like these crazy groups marching and all that stuff. And they're very small, but the retrograde Mars, it's active. Mars retrograde symbolizes evil. It symbolizes conflict. It's in the first house of the people. So it's very much active. We have a very upset populace fighting over foreigners. That's what it shows here. All right, I was going to do the lunar eclipse with this, but the solar eclipse is the primary driver of mundane astrology and what's coming to America. Lunar eclipses do affect us, but they're more on a personal level, right? The lunar eclipses rule our town, our neighbors, while the solar eclipse rules the nation at large. So I feel like for mundane astrology, I think I'm just going to stick with this one. Maybe I'll do a whole nother video that surrounds the lunar eclipse, and I'm going to break down what these eclipses mean for you and your signs more individually. So if you got something out of this, leave a comment. If you have a question, definitely ask me. I'm sure I missed something, and I'd be happy to go back and look over and answer your questions. So make sure you like and subscribe. I plan on dropping more of these long form videos. Those of you that know me know I usually do more short form, but I'm trying to get back and do more of these so we can all stay on the same page, because I've been pretty accurate now for the last few years with my predictions if you've been following me. All right, guys.